This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
If, and here's the truth, no, those reactions that you're having, that's the normal reaction to an abnormal situation. What you are feeling, your heart racing, the roller coaster of emotions, the muscle tightening, the confusion temporarily where I'm trying to, it's hard to focus again in the midst of it. It's all I can think about. If we interpret those things as indicators of a personal failure, or do I say, no, wait, that's the normal part. That's the part that makes sense. What just happened? That doesn't make any sense at all. And it's not that I'm broken. I'm simply having a bad case of being human.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chelinsky. My guest today is Jeff Gorter. He's the VP of Clinical Crisis Response Services at R3 Continuum, and he has extensive experience consulting and responding to critical incidents in businesses and communities. We talked about cascading collective crises. We talked about what does a crisis response look like in an organization and what might leaders need to be thinking about in the aftermath. It was a wonderful conversation. I think you're going to learn a lot. Jeff, I'm so excited that we finally got you sitting in one place for this conversation.
Oh, Manya, thank you so much for your persistence and your patience. I know it's been a while, and it reminds me of the old saying that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. We tried and tried, but life just kept interfering in it. So,
Well, Jeff, there's a lot of life going on right now, as you know. And before we dive into that and what I mean by that, I want to start out with what is one thing that you have done in any part of your life that you never thought you would do?
that's a great question. And I would say this was kind of my post-COVID reintegration into life, sort of a statement in that regard. That myself and three other guys, we did the Camino del Santiago in Spain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there's many different routes, but we did what's called the Camino Primitivo, which is the one that sort of established it all back in 800 AD.
Okay.
And it's considered the toughest because it's more mountainous than some of the others. So yeah, walking 240 miles in 14 days was something I never would have thought I could do, but was pleasantly surprised that we accomplished it.
That is amazing. And that's a very short number of days, it feels like, for that distance. Well, a little fun fact. During the pandemic, I found an app where I virtually walked the Camino del Santiago, and it would take me to, I would say I walked 3 miles today, and then it would jump me 3 miles and show me Google Earth what I was looking at. So, not the same kind of experience as yours, I'm sure.
But still very cool. Oh, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Oh man, that's so cool. I want to do the real thing one day. So I'm very envious that you got a chance to do that. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we are talking about all the things in life that happens while we're making other plans, right? The crises that occur. And that's something that you focus on. You help people plan for crises and you help people after a crisis has helped. So let's just dive right in. From your perspective, what does strong leadership look like in times of crisis?
The company that I'm with is R3 Continuum, and we respond to crisis on behalf of workplaces between 2 and 3,000 times a month. I share that just to give the context because we interface with leaders in the midst of crisis, yeah, thousands of times a month. And so it's something that we have grown, unfortunately, very skilled at responding to, by virtue of just the volume that we
Mhm.
respond to. And so what I have seen in the course of that time, and I've been with the organization coming up on 21 years, I've seen examples of leaders who have dropped the ball, and no, I'm not saying that in a denigrating fashion, but I mean, most leaders aren't trained to respond to that. And I've seen leaders who were shining examples of how to navigate and lead their people through it. And so I would say that it comes down to two specific elements: compassion and competence. And what I have seen is that leaders tend to bifurcate. They tend to go to one extreme or the other. So you can get the ones that are overly competent. They focus on the competence part and they are all leaderly in the midst of the event, but it leaves the impression that, do they get it? Do they understand? They seem to be all task focused and checking off the boxes. And, while those things may need to be done, they have not communicated to us in a way that suggests they get it. Now, the other side of the coin is, you can have very empathic leaders who are clearly connected to the event and personally very expressive on that. And that can be a very good thing. It's an essential thing. But it's also true that nobody wants to be led by a puddle. And that if it suggests that you are overwhelmed by it,
Mhm.
opposed to attuned to it. And so the most successful leaders I've seen are when they are able to establish that balance between to know what we're going to do, but also to know why we're going to do it. Because this is important and this matters, and I get it. This is powerful for us.
Right. Wow. That how does a leader stay grounded, or what are the skills or the structures that need to be in place for them to be able to hold both of those things in a crisis?
I think that here's the secret is they don't have to do it themselves. And that's the thing that leaders tend to. I get it. Being in a crisis creates a element of tunnel vision. It's all I can see. It's all I can think about. And it boxes out everything else. But that also eliminates then reaching out to others, getting additional perspective, additional ideas, being able to see the big picture. And so resisting that temptation to isolate in the midst of a crisis, but instead reaching out. Now, for some, that may be with reaching out to other peers in a leadership position.
Hmm.
It could be because we operate in a corporate setting. Almost every business has access to an employee assistance program. That is an often untapped resource in the midst of a crisis for the leaders as well as the employees who are going through it. And then, of course, that's one of the things that we at R3 Continuum do is that we offer that consultation to assist leaders at a time like that, as well as providing on the ground psychological first aid support for their employees to be able to cope with it and to be able to say, what does the next few hours, days, and weeks look like as I recover?
Right. And that's so important. And that's something I think a lot about is that help people for the longer term. It seems to me sometimes in the immediate aftermath, some of the actions are easy to identify. Get the office back opened, make sure everybody's physically safe, some of these kind of things. And my whole thing is let's make sure we're actually paying attention to the mental health and those who've been traumatized. But now you mentioned the number of crises that you respond to a month. And when I first heard those numbers, I was shocked. And I realized those are crises of all different sizes and different types. I don't think you can average that out. I'm curious though, how long does it take people to recover?
Mm.
Does the type of crisis matter? Can people really get back to things pretty quickly? And I know I'm asking an impossible question. Hi, it's Manya. You're listening to Notes on Resilience, conversations about leadership, recovery, and how we show up in the difficult moments. If something here hits home, or if you're navigating a crisis, or you're seeing something in your team you want to talk through, I'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch at my website, manyachilinski.com. Now, back to the episode.
Sure, sure. So it is true that crisis is endlessly creative. Every version and every variation of that. And in fact, everybody is an expert on the last crisis. It's the unexpected thing that nobody saw coming that defines a crisis by its very nature. But, I would say probably half of what we respond to is the unexpected death of an employee. And so that might be for causes of an illness or a heart attack or something like that, an automobile accident. And so you might call that a course of life event. Those are the normal things that any of us as humans are going to encounter at some point
Mhm.
in the course of our lifespans. And so, that has a kind of, that is more of a grief and loss impact for people, but all the way from bank robberies and active shooters and natural disasters and terrorist attacks. So it spans the gamut. Your question is astute to say, well, how long does it typically take? And here's the thing, it's not the incident that determines it, it's the impact that determines the length of time. And I think that's an important distinction because many people make the mistake of, well, was this traumatic enough? Does this count? Should we get additional help? Should we, does it fall into that? And it's not the incident itself, it's the impact on that individual or that group. And the impact can be defined, shaped by previous lived experience, adverse childhood events that may, create a heightened sensitivity to that specific event that happened today.
Right.
Was it something that struck the core of my identity? I think of like the El Paso shooting in Walmart that was targeting the Latino community, or the shooting at the Pulse nightclub that targeted the LGBTQ community. So if it's something that it's like, whoa, that could have been me, why wasn't it me? That enhances that sense of the challenge to recover from that.
Right. And as you say, I like that crisis is endlessly creative and each is unique. And some are things that happen relatively quickly, and then you're dealing with the aftermath. Some are things that take a while to unfold, minutes, hours, days. In the pandemic, probably much longer than that. How do you help organizations move from that we have to react to this thing that's happening, that mode, into the future, like the long-term recovery? And I feel like quite often when the intensity of the moment has passed, there's a big push to let's just get back to the way things were.
Sure, sure. Well, and here's an interesting thing is that it is true that from a business continuity, maintaining the service and the operations of a company are what a leader is charged with. That is part of their responsibility. It goes with the role. They are looked to be able to restore that. And so it might be seen as, well, is that kind of callous to ask people to come back to work? But it turns out, I tell you, when I ask an employee, what do you most want after this? 9 out of 10 of them are going to say, I just want to get back to work. And what they mean is, I want to get back to something that feels normal, predictable, that makes sense, where I feel like I have a sense of agency, where I didn't know what to do when the crisis happened. I want to get back to where my job, I know what to do there. And it turns out there's surprising power in the mundane. People
Hmm.
just want it to be, can it just be like normal again? Well, I think we all felt that during the pandemic, right? after months of it, we're just like, can there just be one day that feels like normal?
Yeah.
When's that ever going to come back? And so being able to return to work, it turns out, is an expression of functional resilience.
Mm-hmm.
It's one way in which they're able to, again, assert a sense of agency and say, I am, in clinical terms, we would say return to pre-event functioning or pre-event status, which is another way of saying, well, that's a fancy way of saying get back to work. And not because work is the higher, that takes precedence over my recovery, but because work is a part of my recovery. I want to reclaim that. And I want to be able to re-engage with taking care of my family and meeting my needs and all of the things that define normal in any other setting.
Right. Well, we talked about the pandemic in there a little bit, and you had used a phrase in another conversation that I'd love to just dig into, the cascading collective crisis. So I don't know if the pandemic fits that description, but I'm so curious. That sounds like a lot harder work to recover from.
Well, it is, and you're right. It's so cascading collective crisis is an emerging framework that kind of really has come. It pre-existed before COVID, before the pandemic, but it has clearly been an element of that. And it is when crises, a series of crises, are proximate. It's called coterminous crises when they are proximate in either time, space, in the same geographic location, or have a similar type of meaning.
Okay.
So they are similar in time, space, or meaning. And why that's significant now is that cascading collective crisis is when one crisis happens and then another one happens right after that, and another one happens, and they kind of stack up one after another. And you never have a moment to actually stop and think, what just happened? What does this mean? What does this say about myself or my company or my community or my country?
Hmm.
When we go from when we stumble from one crisis to the next, we never stop and have what's called meaning attribution. What does this mean? And that's part of creating a narrative. Well, here's what it means. It's the story. Here's what was happening before this event happened. Then this event happened. Here's what I did when the event happened. And here's where I'm at now. That is essential for recovery. Being able to put it in a narrative is another way of saying, okay, I have fit it into the story of my life. Cascading collective crisis means I just keep rolling. I never really recover. I never really stop and think about it. And that has a wearying effect,
Yes.
an element of fatigue that you kind of slow drip kind of thing that accumulates, and you're like, wow, what's going on? Why do I feel such a sense of melancholy? Why do I feel this sort of ennui? Why is it that things just don't seem to be bright or happy anymore? Part of it is because I'm still dealing with the thing that happened 5 years ago with the pandemic, and we rolled right into civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd. We rolled right into multiple wildfires that destroyed entire towns in the West. We've had significant hurricanes, one after another, that have created flooding. And, Asheville being North Carolina last year being an example of a town that was devastated by those kinds of things. It was just one after another. And here's something that there have been other times in history when multiple things have happened at bad times. That in and of itself is not necessarily unique. But what is different right now, and what I contend is exacerbating it,
Hmm.
is that unlike other times, when those things would happen, sometimes it would take days, weeks, maybe even months for people to hear about it. And you would say, oh, wow, I really feel bad for those folks. That thing that happened, wow, we had our event, but now they had their event. And there was a distance that created let's say, a buffering effect. The difference now, today, is that those events can be experienced in real time as close as the device in your pocket or on your desktop and re-experienced, watched. We saw that after 9/11, that how many times in the first couple of months you couldn't turn on the TV without seeing a plane crashing into a building. They replayed it and replayed it and replayed it, not realizing the impact that was having on us.
Right.
And so that is something that is unique, is that we are now experiencing it in a way that brings it right here and
Right.
enhances that level of personal victimization, for lack of a better word.
And we can experience crises that we essentially never would have even heard about in the past because they're happening far away or for whatever other reason. And now they feel close because, as you say, they may be connected in terms of place or time or the people that they're impacting. As you're working with organizations and leaders and is how you approach it different if we're talking about these cascading crises, or is it essentially the same and you just have to keep just chipping away at piece after piece?
I think it's raising the awareness of it. So again, we have the capacity, the adaptive capacity to respond to those things, but only if we acknowledge them. You know, if it falls into that background of stacked up, throw it with the rest of the other crises, and they all just kind of sit there, you didn't have a chance to adapt to that, to assign a meaning, to think about it, and that is an essential element to being able to move forward. So we often recommend we use what's called the ACT model, ACT, and that the A stands for acknowledge and name the event. So it's important to say, I understand the sensitivity to this. So please, I hope that this doesn't come off wrong, but we tend to use euphemisms and dance around it, the dearly departed, the unfortunate event, the and it that kind of not calling it for what it is, that which we can't name continues to have power over us.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that we do, and what a leader needs to do, is to be able to say, we're gathered here today following the death of Bob Smith yesterday in the factory accident that we are all aware of. You need to say Bob's name. You need to call it a death. You need to say it was an accident, and not in a sort of a callous or a cold manner, but just we have to acknowledge it and call it, because everybody knows it. And a leader that dances around it and says, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'll say nothing, has eliminated their, let's say, moral authority. That's the part where the competence comes in. But the C now, the second part, so that's acknowledge and name the event. C is communicate care and competence. So be able to say, and we understand what Bob's death means to all of you. Bob was a beloved colleague and a a key mentor to so many of you. And we have we understand the power, and we've provided this is what businesses reach out to R3 for. We've asked for on-site counselors to come and provide support for us for a period of time, and our EAP is offering resources. And so saying that we understand it, we get the emotional impact, and we have a plan to address it.
Yeah.
We've brought the right resources at the right time, is the C part. And then T of the act is transition to a future focus. So once we've acknowledged it, once we've communicated that we've got it and that we have a plan, then transition to a future focus is saying, so here's what we're going to do. Here's what the next days and weeks look like. Here's how we're going to alter our work schedules to accommodate this, or here's where how resources are going to be allocated over the next period of time. And we will be checking back in with you to ensure that team that reported to Bob is receiving all the resources they need and the support that they so deserve. So casting a vision that says, and we will get through this. That's the implied message. We will be able to get through this. I believe in your resilience. I believe in your capacity. I want to be clear that I would never want to minimize or dismiss the power of these events for people. But by the same token, I would not want to minimize or dismiss the incredible capacity of the human spirit to rise to these occasions and even rise above them so many times. It's where meaning and purpose has leads us forward.
Right. Wow. You have said the word meaning a few times and how important that is to recovery. I'd love to dig a little deeper in, I guess, what do you mean by finding meaning from an event like this?
So there's a field of study for it, and it's meaning attribution, and it when a crisis event happens, it's human nature to want to say, what does this say? And we go in either one of two directions. We say, what does this say about me, internal disposition? What is this? Was I a coward? Was I strong enough? Did I respond in a way that I feel positive about, or am I confused and overwhelmed by it? So I'll say, what does it say about me, or external situation? What does it say about my company, my community, my country? What does it say about out there? And so that is part of how we assign a meaning. It either says something about me or it says something about you,
Okay, yeah.
in and out. And that meaning, the meaning we come to, often determines the long-term trajectory of recovery from it. Because here's again the thing, we are our own harshest critics. And if the meaning we assign to this is that this means I wasn't strong enough, I wasn't smart enough, maybe I'm losing it. Oh my goodness, maybe I'm going crazy. And if we assign a meaning of that this indicates a personal failure on my part, that's going to take you in one direction. If, and here's the truth, no, those reactions that you're having are that's the normal reaction to an abnormal situation. What you are feeling, your heart racing, the roller coaster of emotions, the muscle tightening, the confusion temporarily where I'm trying to, how do it's hard to focus again in the midst of it. It's all I can think about. If we interpret those things as indicators of a personal failure, or do I say, no, wait, that's the normal part. That's the part that makes sense. What just happened? That doesn't make any sense at all. And it's not that I'm broken. I'm simply having a bad case of being human. I'm responding to the event. That's hardwired into us. That is part of our survival, the survival mechanism. All of those feelings, all of those reactions stem from the primitive part that is built into our amygdala, the survival mechanism. When we face a threat, and all of the kinds of things we've been talking about feels like a threat to me,
Yep.
then I'm going to do one of three things. I'm either going to think, can I take this threat, fight, or can I outrun the threat, flight, or if I stay still, maybe it won't see me. And that's freeze, fight, flight, or freeze is the survival mechanism. That is, as you can see, that's very primitive.
Right.
It's built into us. I mean, you don't really get to choose that. That's part of our brain saying, this feels like a threat, and I'm clicking into survival mode to enhance your safety in the middle of this situation. And knowing that those reactions are normal and make sense gives you the moment, the opportunity to say, okay, this doesn't mean anything bad about me. This doesn't mean I failed. It means that I'm reacting out of that survival mechanism. Now I can make the decision of what the next step is.
Okay. It's so interesting you say that because my own experience is very much feeling like I'm the only one who feels this way. Wasn't seeing it in the news. I must be the only one who feels this way. So it must be my fault that I can't deal with this. And a few months after the bombing, I was on the phone with a victim advocate who I said something to that effect. And they said, no, 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 no. Stop right there. Something happened to you and you are reacting to that. And that was the first time I'd ever even thought about that concept. And that changed my trajectory to realize, okay, it isn't something wrong with me. I'm responding to something unusual and in all my messy humanness.
That is so incredibly freeing to be able to see it. Now again, I don't say that that realization makes now the path nothing but rainbows on the way up and candy along the way. It's still a difficult thing, but I'm dealing with the reality as opposed to adding to it the sense of, and I must be doing it wrong, or there's something wrong with me because of how I'm handling it.
Right. And by the way, I am still looking for the rainbow and candy path. I would love to find that. Jeff, we are close to the end of time, and I would love for you to answer this last question, which is what is giving you hope right now?
I think that we've circled around and, unexpectedly, the part of our theme today has been meaning. And I think
Mhm.
that the emerging generations' meaning is core to their values, to what they want, to what they are looking for. Being able to do something that is purposeful, that is meaningful, to know that my energy and my efforts are directed towards something worthwhile. And that is something that is, I think, typifies, the emerging generations and is always a source of hope. Being able to, I will share this, that when I responded to 9/11 in New York, that there was at Union Square, there was a gathering place where people would put up placards, and many of them were, "Have you seen my loved one?" or looking for information on this person. And there, the entire park was surrounded by it. But there was one banner that somebody had put out there that said, "Hope is alive." And that was such a powerful message to me at that point, that somebody had taken the time and had the resilience to say, even so, hope is alive.
Mhm.
And I think we have seen example after example of that. Yes, the crisis happens, the bad thing is going to occur. We don't get to pick that. That's life happening. But we do get to pick how we respond to that. And being able to say hope is alive, and that inspires me to not blame myself, but to say, how do I live into that hope? How do I lean into that hope?
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you, Jeff. Now, before we go, can you please just share with our listeners a little bit about your company and what you do and how they can learn more about you?
Sure, sure. So R3 Continuum, and that's the company that I work for, we are a provider of behavioral health services following a crisis. It can be also leadership support, leadership coaching and consultation, as we talked about earlier, that recognizing the leader's role in a crisis is critical. But we also provide the boots on the ground, counselors on site. When it says on TV, counselors were there to support the impacted, oftentimes that can be us. And we have a network of counselors across the country specifically trained in psychological first aid and being able to speak a word of care and compassion into the midst of these situations, with the goal of helping the employees, that organization, return to some sense of normalcy, to be able to determine what the next day looks like.
Nice. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So R3 Continuum, we are r3c.com. r3c.com.
That is easy enough. I'll put a link in the show notes so people can connect with you. And Jeff, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it was my honor, and thank you so much for inviting me to join.
Right. And thank you to our listeners for checking out this episode of Notes on Resilience, and we will catch you next time.